are back. And we are back with a big event. We're going to Pebble Beach, and Pebble Beach is always a good time. Now, we have our work cut out for us this week because who knows what we're going to get with the weather. So it's going to be tough, to say the least, but it's going to be fun. And anyone who knows golf or follows along and knows Pebble Beach knows it's a beautiful course. So there's going to be a lot of fun, but our bets are challenged, having to figure out how we're going to navigate this over the next 4 days. However, we have good news. To help us navigate it, we brought back the big guns this week. As you all know, Sia, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm good. Feels good, by the way. Like the chat is noticing I'm in here. That they seem to be happy. I don't know if you all put them up to that. Can I just say though, like happy to be back. Like I'll try to make it for the Phoenix Open next week. I've told you all, like my schedule's been kind of weird, like a lot of stuff going on, but I'm trying to make every show I possibly can. Can I just say though, it's gotten to a point where we need to acknowledge what David Bieleski is doing at Win Daily, and just in golf in particular. He doesn't know I'm going to say this, and I'm just going to take 10 seconds. Like we see, I recognize it in Discord earlier. People are recognizing just being attached to David in terms of his golf acumen on the World Tour and on the PGA Tour. It is extremely profitable. So just a quick shout out to David, 125-1 on Pavon. And by the way, you all know I was a part of last week's show, but I was in the chat. I was listening to last week's show. I was trying to help draft the team. When I heard the Pavon analysis, it was like 2.5 minutes that David went in, and I put him in a couple of lineups myself. I didn't bet the 125-1 because I just stuck with my outrights like a complete idiot. But the long and short of it is, congratulations to you. Everybody's recognizing it now, which I absolutely love. And I'm just happy to be a part of this whole thing with Tee Off Sports, with Draftmaster Flex, and with Deep Dive Golf. Let's go.
I love it. I love it. Great hit last week, David. If you've been following the show, I'll be honest with you, it happened to me. I didn't know who Pavon was 3 weeks ago, but he started making mentions on our show 3 weeks ago. He came up. By the time last week came, David was all over him. Obviously, he was on my radar, mainly because David was been drafting him for 3 weeks, and then he was playing well, and then I knew who he was. But the point being is, yes, David is incredible. He'll have hits like this. He'll have more of them as the year goes on. But there'll also be times where he picks a guy and he's playing a lot that gets the top 5 and the top 10. Mm-hmm. And just following the show, following these picks, you get to follow the trends of these guys, especially now that we're losing more guys to live. You're going to see more guys pop up like this and having better results. And it's going to be a bit of a change of the tide on the tour. Mm-hmm. And the first people to get to are the people who are going to make the most money. So you come watch our show, you follow along, you'll be a part of the crew, which is why this show works so well. David, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, man, and just humbled with all the praise and shout outs. That's really kind. And I just taken, I guess, a bit of my love for the DP World Tour, and it came through in a big way, obviously, last week. Shout out to Spence as well, who's on Pavon the week before, and it wasn't necessarily a course that I loved him at, but thought it was really good fit at Torrey Pines, as I spoke about pretty extensively on the show ahead of the Farmers, just given his performance on some really long tracks on the DP World Tour, that if you don't have that knowledge, which I know a lot of people don't follow the DP World Tour, certainly not to the extent that I do, a lot of people aren't going to have that out there, and putting that out at sort of like 3.5% ownership from a DFS point of view, and then obviously the 125-1 or longer, depending how many places you took in the betting markets, was awesome to see him get the job done. But yeah, it'd been coming for a while, right? Like we'd had basically the likely winner over the last sort of like 3 holes at every tournament this year. We'd had Thigala and Spieth at the Century. At the Sony Open, we'd had Henley and Putnam and Griot all in the top 10. Henley probably should have won there. And then Sam Burns probably should have won the American Express until we had 2 double bogeys on his last 2 holes, and Nick Dunlap snatched it. So it was coming for a while, and just extremely pleased that it was someone who was paying 125-1, because that just makes it even sweeter.
So sweet it is. 125 is a big hit. And you know what? It's an interesting trend we're seeing this season. It does seem that more long shots are coming through, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I think there are reasons behind that we can certainly break down as the show goes on. But before we do, Spence, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I think you said a very interesting thing, Joel, at the beginning of this. It's from a game theory perspective, all these players leaving to live, and obviously we're in the midst right now of these course rotations every single week. Weather is going to come into play. I think when you listen to the show, you get a lot of that deep dive knowledge. No pun intended, I guess there, David, that comes into the mix though from all the plays that we talk about on this show. And I mean, it's been a very successful season all the way across the board from all three of us, and Sia, who is just crushing it in everything that he is doing himself. So I think this is a very great show knowledge wise.
And that's been the case. If you follow along, while I would say are pretty hot right now, we typically have a lot of hot streaks. And so you want to follow the hot streak when you can. If you followed along last year, there was plenty of times where we were hitting weeks in a row on winners and having lineups that were cashing in every tournament. So follow along, come in for the ride. I always said, I've been saying this from day one, and especially in golf DFS, it is critical to follow along every week. If you follow along every week, you will then have knowledge of which guys are trending in the right direction, and you'll be able to make those picks. It's hard to dive in the middle of the season because it's harder to have the feel for which guys have been playing well the last couple of weeks and who's trending and how you want to plug guys in at different prices and things like that. Now, as I was teasing in the beginning of the show, Spence, you especially, you have your work cut out for you this week. You have plenty of data on Pebble Beach to look at, but how are you going to navigate the course along with there's a second course I'll be playing one day at and the extreme weather?
Yeah, I mean, I think for anybody who follows this tournament, I'm sure you've heard this a million times, so I don't want to get too much into this. It's usually played on 3 courses from Thursday to Sunday. I'm going to note that this year you're going to get rid of Monterey Peninsula from the mix throughout the entire duration of the week. We're also going to see all the amateurs exit on the weekend when everything returns to Pebble Beach for the final 2 rounds. So that's going to give us a 75-25 split of Pebble Beach versus Spyglass Hill. I think at its most basic level, and this is not necessarily a weather-induced answer here, but Spyglass is the more difficult of the 2 venues. On any given day, it's going to play a half shot to 2 shots more challenging. I will say I don't know how true that's going to necessarily be this year. I'd like to see where the weather comes into play on Thursday and Friday because we are looking at a course with much better tree line protection versus that wide open coastal approach that you're going to get at Pebble. Although, you may get that edge that comes to fruition a little bit earlier in the week when the field is going to rotate between those 2 venues. Those amateur partners being into the mix, like you can only make it so challenging. You're going to have pace of play out the ass problem if you try to put these pin locations with problems. So it's going to be easier the first 2 days. It's going to get very difficult on the weekend. Pin locations are going to get more challenging. And this weather, like Sunday right now, the wind is wild. You can go look at that, and I've seen gusts as high as 50, 60 miles per hour. So we'll see if the tournament plays on Sunday. That's always one of my concerns. This could be a 54-hole event. This could finish on Monday. There's a lot of things that come into the mix there. But if we're looking at Pebble in a nutshell, you're going to club down off the tee. There's a lot of forced layups. It's one of the reasons we see over a 12% increase in expected approach play between 0 to 125 yards. I'm pretty much looking for golfers who can handle a POA green complex. I do think there's some level of this being a pitch and putt contest from within 125 yards. And then really it just comes down to that factor that I talked about of around the green play. If the winds pick up, how do you play in a windy condition? If this goes sideways on Saturday and Sunday, I think this could really be an interesting event from both a game theory perspective when we look at ownership and just the expected returns that we're going to get with the weather that's in the forecast.
Totally. And if you guys recall, I don't think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago, there was some really high winds at this tournament, and there was those ridiculous footage of like balls that were just like blown off the green because the wind was so high they couldn't even control where they were going. So let's hope it's not like that because that's just absurd. But this is that course, and this is the type of weather you can get because of its location and things of that nature. Before we move on, a big congratulations is in order to the audience on an excellent draft last week. Even though David drafted Pavon, the audience still won and had a great draft, a great roster. And this is why this show works, because even though we're the experts and we draft great teams, the audience comes up and they draft great teams every week too that are just as competitive as ours. And the insights, the way you guys collaborate is amazing. And not only that, after your win, you have your fearless leader, Sia, helping the draft with you. We'll pull the draft board up now as a friendly reminder, in case anyone is new to the show tonight. We're doing a snake draft. That is the Draftcast. It works like any fantasy football draft you would have. While I explain the rules, audience, since you won, I'll let one of you go ahead and pick the order. The first person to put an order in the chat is what the order is going to be. So someone put an order they want. That's what we're going to roll with. With that, we're going to go snake style 1 through 4. The fourth person will go twice like a snake and go back around like your fantasy football draft. The big caveat here is you do need to stay within a DraftKings salary. So you can't just take all the best players. You have to draft accordingly to ensure that you can afford all the players in your lineup. Audience, we are going to need someone to put an order in so we can get this draft going. The first person to put an order is what we're going to go with. Zach, appreciate you. We're going to go David, audience.
Wow. Did that just happen? Well, Zach's the only one who stepped up. So, like, I can't even criticize that. But you just gave David the first pick. Wow. All right. Japan backed it.
Clocked in. David, without further ado, you're on the clock.
I'm over the moon that just happened because we were talking in the Win Daily Sports Discord before this show, and everyone was giving me a hard time because my lineup, despite having Pavon, was 5 of 6. I thought I was remembering incorrectly, but I'd tipped Patrick Rogers within my betting tips last week, and he finished 9th, and I thought that I had him in my DFS team. And I was incredibly disappointed because I knew that I was very likely going to lose this first pick. And I think Zach has made a dreadful error in judgment by giving it to me because there's one guy this week that I absolutely love. I'm somewhat convinced he's going to win this tournament, and it's Max Homa at 9,300. Max has an excellent record at this tournament. We're seeing kind of with these signature events that the guys who have out of choice gone to some of these tournaments and played them anyway, rather than now being forced to add them to the schedule. Max Homa ticks that box. He's got an excellent record here. He's had 3 top 15s. What really appeals to me, though, is the weather that we're going to face this week. It's going to be extremely wet. It's going to be extremely windy. I expect that it's probably going to be a 54-hole tournament. I'll throw that out there, that I think that there's a very real chance that it could drop down to just 54 holes. But where's Max Homa won? He's won at the Wells Fargo Championship in 2022 in extremely wet conditions. He won the 2022 Fortinet Championship in extremely wet conditions. Of his PGA Tour victories, only one has been lower than -16. It's generally in that -8 to -16 range where he gets his wins. That's exactly what I kind of expect this week. It just seems like everything is absolutely lining up to Max Homa playing at home in California. We know how good he is there with the number of wins he's had in the state as well. I just think he's an excellent bet, and I'm not afraid to say he was my favorite on my betting card. I think I can say that quite openly because this is the advantage of being in the Win Daily Discord is you would have got that price on Monday when I tipped him at 22 to 1. You're lucky if you're finding him at 15 to 1 or 16 to 1 now. So that's the advantage of getting into Win Daily. Tomorrow is actually the last day of our promos. There's a special link in the chat there if you want to get first access to all of our betting tips before those prices move, because 22 to 1 for Max Homa was extremely good value.
Ivan jumps into the chat and he says, no, David got Homa. It looks like Ivan got here late because otherwise he would have jumped in and picked a different draft order. But I got to be honest, Joel, can I just tell you, I'm excited about, I think you saw the chat. They're ready. They already have the pick, and it's who I would have gone with. So I'm curious to hear your take, Joel, Spencer's take, and David's take. I mean, we can address Max Homa if y'all want to, but I love Justin Thomas this week, and I'm not a Justin Thomas guy. So if he fails me, I'll be not a Justin Thomas guy next week too. But this guy's trending in the right direction. I'm just throwing it out there. I love this pick. Spencer, any thoughts on JT this week?
Yeah, I like JT a lot also. I just want to say one thing about Max Homa very quickly. If we wanted absolute chaos on this show, you guys should have given me the number 1 pick because I did not know that David was going to go that route. I would have taken Max Homa, and I think from just the sheer chaos that would have ensued from it, would have been great content. Like just we could have pulled clips from it, but fortunately we did not go that route. Like the Homa play a lot for all the reasons that David talked about. But I think this is a great spot for Justin Thomas where, you know, there's a lot of players in that range with him, and I'm not going to name names right now. We can talk about this a little bit deeper at the end of the show, but I think there's a lot of public support with some of these names that I don't necessarily agree with as much. And to me, JT is trending in the direction of being more popular, but even if he gets to that chalk range, I think he's good chalk this week. Like I agree with you, Sia. Everything is trending in the right direction. And if you look a couple years ago, if you want to talk about a tournament with weather, look at that Players Championship where he was on the wrong end of that weather draw, and the performance he put together compared to the rest of his wave was insane. And I would not be shocked. Like, you're going to have to find the right wave to find success. But I think Thomas's game is perfectly and ideally suited for a tournament like this.
Yeah. Joel, what are your thoughts on JT?
I think JT's a polarizing figure right now. He's playing really well. He was really bad last year. And it's, historically, he's a prestigious golfer. He's typically at the top. So I think people are rooting for his turnaround. It does seem like it's coming. I'm rooting for it. I want it to be coming. I think you made a really good point, Sia, about that tournament where it was terrible weather, or did Spencer just make that point where it was terrible weather and he had that one day where he kind of went off? And I think I would be keeping that in mind, but I still have concerns about what I saw last year. And I think he hasn't proven it fully yet, and we'll see where he goes. My stance right now on GT is let's see where his ownership gets to. If he gets pretty high, I probably will come off of him. But if he stays at a reasonable ownership percentage, then I'll be playing some JT.
David, I got to ask you, because JT is probably going to be one of my outrights. I like him in DFS, but you've been red hot. And if you're a no-go on JT, I got to second guess it at least a little bit. Before we get to Spencer's pick, where are you at on JT?
Yeah, look, I think he's a really good selection. The other round, and combined with the Players Championship, that was at Southern Hills at the PGA Championship, where he played really well in extremely high wins that Joel's kind of alluding to. The other thing is the concentration of approach buckets here. Because of all the cliffs and hazards, like you can't really overpower this golf course with driver, and everyone ends up hitting these shots between 100 150 yards. Justin Thomas is one of the best in the game over the last 12 months in that particular range. Despite the fact that he's had these troubles, he does really look like he's back. My one concern, if I was to have just one concern, is that he's played Pebble Beach twice, and so he's never really chosen to come here all that often. And so my question would be, is that just because of scheduling? Is it because he doesn't like the fit, he doesn't like the Poana greens? That would be my only question around it. But I think that he's a solid play, and I'm quite happy to take him. I'll have exposure to him in DFS for sure.
All right, that's good to hear. All right, I feel a little bit better about that. Spencer, your pick.
I'm going to go, and I know there's a lot of popularity around this, but I'm going to go with who I think is the most mispriced player on the board now that Max Homa is gone. I'm going to take Eric Cole at 7,300. I'm not going to put too much thought into his miscut last week. Like, we are far enough into this run with him where my model has compiled enough data to feel like books or DFS sites or whatever we're looking at here is just off when it comes to his weekly pricing. Torrey Pines was always a course that would negatively affect his driving ability. That issue is going to get completely removed here with the short nature off the tee. And then the thing that I liked most is the trending data in my model. So as I always talk about, I run things as a weighted perspective to look at a course. So how does the strokes gained tee to green work specifically for Pebble Beach? He jumped inside the top 5 of my model in expected performance there. So 6 top 20 finishes in his last 9 starts. I think this is a great bounce back opportunity for him, even if the public looks to be on him. Like, this is a nice spot for Cole at a price tag to where he, in reality, in my opinion, should be $1,500 more than this.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think there's a lot of good betting opportunities for Eric Cole, not just in the matchup market, or maybe if you want to throw an outright on him, but also in like the T20, T30, T40 markets. T30, he's minus 110. So if you have that market available, that seems like maybe, again, with only 80 people in this 80 golfers in this tournament, that might be the sweet spot at minus 110 to take Eric Cole. Joel, thoughts on Eric Cole? Does seem like a bargain, which means he's going to be chalky, of course. Everybody should know that.
I love that pick. And for the same reasons that Spencer said, he seems just way underpriced for the way he's been playing, and think he's just the best value on the board. And we've said this before. This seems like one of those times where you just go ahead and eat the chalk, and you find where places, other areas to get different to make sure your overall lineup isn't too chalky. But I think there's a lot of leverage in his price here at this tournament.
Fair enough. David, real quick before we get to Joel's back-to-back picks, there are a lot of guys just from a DFS standpoint that are right next to Cole that are going to be like literally 1/5 his ownership. We don't have to get into those guys, but is Eric Cole worth it to you, knowing that he is, the chalk in the 7K range?
Yeah, I think he's like a very, very clear misprice, as Spence said. I have him about 13% ownership. Only thing I'd really add is that he's from Palm Springs, California. It's where he's born. So it's the Californian aspect as well to him. And I agree, like the driver kind of gets taken out of play at Pebble Beach a lot just because fourth widest fairways on tour, and you can't overpower it with driving distance. So that's kind of the recipe that's going to suit Cole. So you just are definitely going to need to be able to get different elsewhere, because the advantages is a no cut event, but there is some condensed ownership around his name.
Yeah. Joel, you got back-to-back picks here.
All right. I'm going to start with my favorite play. He does look a little bit chalky, which I'm surprised by. I didn't think he would be this chalky this week. I'm going to go with Viktor Hovland. I understand, the concern with Hovland's going to be, is he going to struggle around the green? That's obviously his big weakness. Is that going to come up here? I think my counter argument to that is he's probably the best when it comes to peppering small greens. And that's the opportunity he's going to have here at this course. And we've seen him at the end of last year make a turn where when he's in contention at these tournaments, I think early in his career, he wasn't really showing up in the big moment, and that changed. And he started kind of rising and playing great down the stretch. And I think this is a year where we see Hovland make a jump where, Rahm's gone. I think he's going to now be competing with Scheffler and Rory for the tour's top player. And I think he has a great result this week. To be able to get him significantly cheaper than Scheffler and Rory, I think is a big advantage. And I'm going to pair him with, in my second pick, a guy that I don't think will carry as much ownership. He's just playing really, really great golf right now, and that's Benny Ann. I do think Benny Ann's a little high priced for what he normally does, but in his current form, he's playing so well. I think he's just a better golfer right now than what we've historically seen. He deserves to be priced at $8K, and I think that results that we've been seeing is going to carry over to this week. So I'm buying Benny Ann right now because I think he will be more permanently in the 8K range as the season goes on.
Yeah, Benny Ann, I can't really decide on. I think I'm in on Viktor Hovland. Spencer, how about you on these two? Yeses or nos on Hovland and Benny Ann?
I'll say yes to Ben On. I'm going to say no to Viktor Hovland. And I think it's for the reason that Joel talked about. I'm just going to be on the opposite side of it. And when you hear my next name, I'm going to take, there's the same concerns that are going to enter the mix here. And we can get to that in a second. But I just worry a little bit about Hovland, and it makes natural sense why people are going to him. There's such a price decrease between Rory and Scheffler down to him that it's a natural. I think everybody had the same inclination early in the week that you can save salary going that route. But for me, there's soft pricing across the board. So I really don't mind paying up in those spots. I think they're better caliber players than Hovland, but I mean, we'll see. I never seem to get Hovland right for whatever that's worth.
Fair enough. All right. Well, it is your pick. I'm sure, listen, if David wants to comment after your next pick on Hovland or Benny Ann, he certainly can. But let's go ahead and hear who you have after Eric Cole.
So I think this is a player that historically, when you look at the data, and I kind of made this argument for the Zozo that when he won the event, if that gives the clue of who this is, that the win play for him, stats go down. And I didn't necessarily believe that to be the case. I know on his second round there, he blew up when the wins picked up. And I understand that as I make this selection here. But I think Colin Morikawa was really intriguing as a bounce back candidate here. We watched him miss in both directions off the tee last week. He missed the cut. He lost 1.9 shots to the field. That's not going to necessarily be ideal. But I think my argument that would go against that would be he hasn't lost strokes in back-to-back starts off the tee since the 2021 BMW and Tour Championship events. Putter's always a problem for him. We're talking about 4 consecutive tracked weeks of losing between 1.2 and 2.6 shots. You do have that Zozo tournament where he won that we don't necessarily have the return of the data there to point towards, but Poe has always been his best surface to find success on. He gets these random spike weeks that allow him to pop up on the board. I do see the ownership trending a little bit higher than I was anticipating it for him missing the cut, but top ranked player in my model for weighted proximity and second place grade for weighted scoring for this course. I think this is a perfect buy low spot on Colin Morikawa.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think Colin Morikawa is like one of those guys that people are either going to love to play him or hate to play him this week. David, I want to go to you as we see nominations come in for our next pick. I mean, obviously we've had Hovland, Benny Ann, and Colin Morikawa drafted since you last spoke. Any of those guys fit the description that you're looking for in terms of being in your player pool?
What I'd say on Benny Ann, right? Like the confidence I lose in him is always with the putter. The 2 times that he's played here where strokes gained have been tracked, he's gained pretty well with a putter on Pebble Beach. So I'll put that out there. That I think it's a pretty sneaky pick. I think Joel's right that he's priced pretty high, and some people will avoid him because of that. It's like, do I really want to be paying 8K for Benny Yarn in this type of field? And as soon as you know that the general public's betting that kind of way or leaning that direction, I think it's pretty savvy. I'd probably reiterate same concerns that Spence has, is that there seems to be this trend that Colin Morikawa tends to not play all that well in high winds. That's exactly what we expect to see this week. In saying that, I made that exact comment at the Zozo Championship when Spence took Colin Morikawa because it was going to be a really windy week and he won the tournament. So that would be my concern. He is very good from the key range of 100 to 150 yards.
All right. Looks like team audience has made the pick. It's Ludwig. We have 3 or 4 different pronunciations of the last name, but I believe it's Aubert. Ludwig Aubert. Listen, this is an interesting pick because I'm looking at his ownership and it's not low, but it's certainly like what I'm looking at is that Ludwig, maybe Victor, Justin Thomas, maybe Colin Morikawa. Like what I'm seeing is they're all sub 20%, 9,000 and above. Everybody else tends to be more than 20%. So you are getting some ownership leverage, I guess, at least off the people that are next to him. I think this is a pretty good pick. I haven't decided if I'm going to have him in my pool, but you take one weapon away from him, but he's so good at everything else. So I don't know. Ludwig, I'm going, Joel, I'm going to go to you and then to David on this one. What are your thoughts on Ludwig for this tournament?
I like him. I had him on my notice when I was looking to draft in this draft. So I like him a lot. I think to your point, you do feel like you might be losing one of his biggest strengths. But to your point, he's way more than just a big hitter. This is just a very good all-around golfer that just happens to also be a very good driver. I'm not going to go as far as to say he's as good as Jon Rahm. That's outrageous at this point. But his game profile is similar in that Jon Rahm kills the ball, but he's not just a driver, right? And that was you wouldn't not play Jon Rahm in a course like this because you lose the benefit of the drivers. I would think of it the same way with him.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. David, you got back-to-back picks. I don't know if you want to comment on Ludwig, but you got 2 picks regardless.
Yeah, I'm going to make a pretty bold call and say that I'm completely out on Ludwig this week. And the reason would be is that approach range of 100 to 150 yards is by far his weakest approach range. He actually loses strokes to an average PGA Tour player within that range. His percentage of good shots from 100 to 150 yards is only 5.9%. And he sits in like the bottom 10% of the PGA Tour within that particular bucket. You just are going to end up having to hit all those shots. And I agree on the comment that this course will take one of his strongest assets in his driver out of the bag a little bit as well. So I'm probably I am a fade on Aberg this week. Back-to-back picks for me. First of which I'll take Adam Hadwin. Really good last time out when we saw him in the desert getting 6 of the American Express. I just really like the fact that he's played this multiple times previously, 4 occasions, gained in putting a big way in 3 of those. And he's got a 16th, an 18th, and a 39th back when this was a full field event. When he finished 16th, he also lost a ton of strokes putting here, and he's generally a very, very good putter, and he's putted well here previously as well. That just kind of speaks to the fact that he's excellent in that 100, 150 yard approach bucket, which is absolutely key to success this week for me. Data Golf also have him ranked at 36 compared to his World Golf ranking of 47th. And as I've mentioned previously on the show, that's always a situation that I think is right for some connection. So I think he's very, very good value. After that, I'm going to go to Christian Bezuidenhout. Missed the cut at the Farmers, largely down to a lack of putter, but the 2 tournaments that we've seen him back this year, the American Express, the Farmers, he's gaining in a really big way on approach. This is right in his wheelhouse in terms of his key approach stats from 100 to 150 yards are very, very good. He's played this course once. He finished 14th. He also gained 8 strokes putting that week. And the fact that he's going to find success on these Poana greens in a tournament where a lot of people are going to be missing greens is really key for me. I'm really focusing on that putting and short game aspect here this week.
Excellent pick. By the way, can I just announce we have a celebrity sighting in the chat? Have you all noticed? We have none other than friend of the show, by the way, Degenerate75, who has been, somebody was asking, hey, when is he going to be on the Draftcast? Well, I don't know. Maybe you can make it next week. We'd love to have you on the Draftcast, but he's been on this Draftcast more than once. And he's in the chat. And Zach Jeffers says, a mother father is always lurking in the back. Absolutely love that. He gives him a shout out. I always support the homies, he says. Speaking of supporting the homies, there's a guy that Japan is supporting, that Silent Assassin is supporting, that I really support, but he's not our pick. It appears that our pick is none other than Beau Hossler. So listen, first of all, let me just say real quick about Hadwin. Hadwin is interesting leverage off of Eric Cole. He's like right next to him. I think, speaking of leverage, you could play Cole with Hadwin. Not a lot of people are going to do that most likely. But if you're looking for some of those guys next to Eric Cole, that pretty much everybody next to Eric Cole is like pretty low ownership comparatively. So that's just something to think about. I've heard a lot of buzz about Bezuidenhout. I think it was Golf Gambler early in the week and Byron that were talking about him on Twitter. And I was talking with them about him. And then I went and looked at his stuff. I mean, David, I think he's a great selection. I think he is really primed. The short game is there. The approach game seems really dialed in. Really, for once, kind of like Seabez here. All right, any thoughts on Beau Hossler? Spencer, I got to go to you on Beau Hossler. I'm never as in as much as people tend to be, especially in the last few months on Beau Hossler. I think he's got game. I don't know that this is the course for him personally. Where are you at on Beau Hossler?
I'm probably in on the last 3 picks that have been made. I thought David's route was kind of grabbed all the value down in that section. I was going to take Adam Hadwin, was going to try to round this out with Christian Bezuidenhout. So that's 3 for 3 now, David. So congratulations there. You've done a very good job starting this build. I'm not necessarily a Hossler guy myself, but the trending form for him and the trending data has just been skyrocketing him up my model. Like, I think it's like legitimate, the results that we're seeing from him. And he's one of these players in 2024 that the sky is the limit for him if he continues this with some of these data points that I'm seeing. So I'm in on all 3 players. I think all 3 are savvy picks.
Joel, in or out on Beau Hossler?
I had him in my lineup also as one of my next picks. So I'm definitely, and I think the audience is doing a great job so far.
Yeah, fair enough. And for the record, he does have a good record here, 11th and 3rd over his last 2. So good point, Zach Jeffers. He certainly appears to be a course fit based on how he's done over the last 2 years at least. All right, Spencer. Okay, so I love what just happened. David stole some of your picks. You're like squirming in your seat a little bit. I got a Michael Jordan fist pump out of David Bieleski there. So we stole some picks. You got anything left in the holster?
Well, the first name I was going to do before I came back with Hadwin is still on the board, and there's going to be a lot of volatility with this play for the obvious reasons. We have not seen this player really produce since October. There's nothing better than a 19th place finish during that time. But one of the things I found interesting is he jumped in my model for weighted strokes gain total over his past 24 rounds when I ran this data for Pebble Beach. So I am going to take Wyndham Clark, 7,400 here. He was by far the most significant difference I had from any golfer on the board. The high-end numbers continued looking very great for me when we look into this 4th place grade on the pitch and putt that I ran, the 15th place rank for weighted scoring. As I said, very low floor, but the upside is there in my opinion if he can put the pieces together. I don't think he's going to be very popular. I don't expect very many people to like this pick just with the form that we've seen, but he's a name for me that is just too cheap at this point.
Joel, your thoughts?
I think it's a good pick. To be honest, he wasn't on my radar until Spence said him, but for all the reasons Spence gave, I think he's interesting. There was a point last year where he got to a point where he was like a top 5 priced golfer every week where he was playing so well. So to see him at 7,400 seems like a really good value.
What's interesting about the value too is he's not really getting a lot of ownership. I mean, there's basically like 4 guys in the 7K range. Eric Cole's at the top of that chart, but there's like 4 guys in the 7K range that are somewhere between 10 and 18% or 12 and 18%. Certainly Wyndham Clark's not one of them. Adam Hadwin's not one of them. So these are really good leverage plays for a relatively short field of 80 people. So I don't mind the Wyndham Clark pick. David, any thoughts on Wyndham Clark? I think he's going to be a really controversial pick among people because we know what he's capable of. We just haven't seen a lot of it lately.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting bounce back spot for him. What I would say is that he does struggle in that key range of 100 to 150 yards, in saying that he's one of the best in the world from 150 to 200. And whether with the winds, there's going to be a little bit of variation and some volatility that comes with this week inherently because of the weather. So I think it is an interesting spot where you can perhaps get a little bit different with someone like Wyndham. I see him at about 7% at the moment in terms of ownership profile, and in a condensed 80-man field, that's really not all that much for someone who I think is objectively underpriced. So I think he's potentially potentially a sneaky little play there. And if you can just lay up to his number in terms of approach and get into that 150, 200 yards, I think it's potentially somewhere you could find some success. The other thing I'll add about Hosler is he's another California guy as well. So I'll just chuck that out there as well for people's information.
Yeah, and I just took a second look at his short game numbers, especially as of late, and they are just so pristine. I mean, just absolutely perfect. So my bet on that. Maybe he should be in my pool. But again, he's one of those guys in the 7K range that does carry some ownership with him. All right, Joel, you got Victor Hovland. You got Benny Yon. You got 2 picks. Who's next?
All right. Well, I'm going to stay in the 7K range here. I'm actually taking 2 guys that are the exact same price. So the first pick, I'm going to start with JT Poston. JT Poston, to me, a couple things. Current form, outstanding. If you want to find someone who's excels in that 100 to 150 yard range, he's one of the best on tour. If you combine those 2 things, you get a guy under 8K. Seeing JT Poston get a top 10 result wouldn't surprise me in the very least. I think it's a great value you can find in this field. And price at the same spot is Sahith Theegala. I think both these guys are giving you top 10 upside at under 8K. And if you want to think about like what we were saying about Aubert, Theegala's biggest weakness is his wild driver. Yes, that can hurt you if it's horrific, but if he's been pretty good recently. If he can just keep it neutralized where he's not losing balls on this course, that shouldn't hurt him here. And his strengths, which are closer to the green and things like that, he can highlight. So I think he can play to his strengths here and give us a really good result. There'll be plenty of upside with him as well.
Spencer, I want to ask you, first of all, I think Poston is objectively a good play. Tell me if you disagree there, but Sahith Theegala is the guy that I think, again, almost like Wyndham Clark, people will just have a strong opinion one way or the other on him. Oh, your thoughts on both of these guys?
I don't want to say that I'm out on Theegala because markets, like the sharper markets, would agree with Joel with this answer. There's been incredible movement in a lot of areas and matchups. I saw the question Cole over Theegala minus 120. My model thinks there's a lot of value in that price there. I don't think the general market agrees with that sentiment. So maybe I am missing something with Theegala that Joel sees in some of the sharper money that's moving things, which, I mean, knowing Joel with his endless money that he has, it might be Joel moving all the prices here. But I agree with you, Sia, on Poston. He's also just a name who's too cheap at this point. He's a legitimate, whatever you want to call him, we'll make this very simple. He's a legitimate top 30 golfer in the world at this point, and you could probably push that even higher.
Yeah, totally agree. By the way, Moshe is the one who asked that Cole over Theegala question. Let me just lob that real quick, just kind of like, do you like it or do you not like it? David, would this be a stay away or would you lean Cole over Theegala or the opposite?
Yeah, no, I like Cole over Theegala there. I think that's a pretty savvy bet. Of those 2 plays, I probably prefer Poston, but I think I'm probably out of both in terms of my player pool this week. I'd rather, you can get Keegan Bradley at half the ownership of Poston this week, and he's 200 cheaper. And I think that with his ability in sort of wet weather and the winds, I think that would probably be a route I'd look to get a little bit different. Especially, I've got some pretty chalky guys in my lineup at the moment already.
All right, Spencer, you're up next. What you got?
I don't know how I ended up with the 2 biggest chalk options of the $7,000 range when I come on every single show, and I'm always like, I hate that range. I never buy into the chalk there, but I like Denny McCarthy at 7,500. Great POA player, great in the wind. Think the price is too cheap. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time explaining it, but inside of the top 15 of my model this week.
Yeah, I mean, a 4th and 12th over his last 2. Now, granted, this varies a little bit because, we don't have Monterey Peninsula, but clearly Denny McCarthy comfortable on this course. I haven't made a decision on Denny McCarthy. I haven't really given him a hard look. Joel, in or out on Denny?
I'm in. He was someone I was considering. I took him out of my draft pool just a few minutes ago, but I'm definitely in on him and considering him. Seems like a good course fit to me. He should, he's not the longest hitter. That shouldn't penalize him too much at this course. He's playing pretty well. I do think I prefer him a little bit more in cash than I would at GPP, but I like Denny.
All right. We're waiting on nominations for the audience pick. While we do that, David, Denny McCarthy, yes or no?
Yeah, I really like his short game profile, and exactly what Joel just said, is that the drive is not so much of a disadvantage at Pebble Beach as it is at other destinations, and he can lean on his short game in this kind of weather. So I really like that. The other thing I'd like to mention while the audience decides on their final pick, which it looks like they've just done, is this comment from Ed, which we've failed miserably. We got too excited about 125 to 1 on Pavon. But let's not forget that the curse of making Joel's team on the PGA Draft Cast is back. He took Adrian Moronk. This always happens, and it's I'll give this to Joel, okay? It's never guys with like injury concerns that we know like something's going to happen. These just happen out of the blue. Joel drafts them, they withdraw. That's what happens. So shout out to Joel for bringing back the curse for 2024.
And this
Joel's
one,
draft him and he goes to live all of a sudden.
That's a worse
they watch the
You're
show.
kicking people off the tour and making them join another tour. At least most of mine have just been withdraws through injury. But yeah, I hope it's not the case this week, but it's probably safe just to avoid anyone I draft to make sure they don't withdraw into your laps in the tournament.
Well, good news. The audience has picked a player, and you know what? There's a lot of guys that I clearly have in my player pool. I talked about Justin Thomas. I'm going to probably add Seabez to my player pool. Max Homa, Eric Cole's going to be in there. Kurt Kitayama, I just don't have an opinion on. So that's the audience pick. It's not that I mind the pick, but I just kind of want to go around the horn here before we get to David's back-to-back picks. David, I'm going to start with you since you have 2 picks to give us in just a second. In or out, Kurt Kitayama?
I'm personally out on Kitayama.
Spencer?
I think it's very close. I don't have a strong opinion either, Sia. I'm going to say, though, if you make me pick a side, I'll say in.
Joel?
I'm going to say out.
Yeah, I'm going to phrase it like Spencer. If you make me pick a side, which my question set up just like that, I'm going to be out on Kurt Kitayama as well. It doesn't mean he can't succeed. Doesn't mean he's not a good value with some upside, but I think I'm out on Kitayama. All right, David, we got back-to-back picks. We got Max Homa, Adam Hadwin, Christian Bezuidenhout. Did I say that right, David? And now you got 2 picks. Oh, you're on mute. He doesn't know he's on mute yet. He still doesn't know he's on mute. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, my apologies.
Bit room's not clear, is it?
Oh, okay. Fair enough. He's distracted.
Sorry, just had someone come in.
Right. Yep. So
I'm going to go with Xander here. I think that he's an excellent pick at the price that he's available. I chucked in the Win Daily Discord a little bit earlier that I think that having a little speculation on a straight forecast, Max Homa first, Xander second at 200 to 1 isn't the worst bet that you can make this week. Kind of seems like the kind of spot that Xander could just suddenly backdoor a second place finish. And then I'll combine that with Andrew Putnam, whereas his putting and short game stats really are going to sing out to me at this course. He's got a really good record on Pebble Beach as well. 6 in 2022, consistently driving very well here. And then his putting obviously comes to the fore. He's also really elevated his game on approach in the last kind of 6 months, and particularly in that wedge kind of range of 100 to 150 that I suspect that we'll find this week.
Putnam is very, very interesting to me. There's a lot of really good, in my opinion, like 6K options. Maybe I think that because it's a no-cut event and I just want to like get lucky with some guys in that upper 6K range in particular. But Putnam's very interesting. Spencer, your thought? I mean, it's hard to not like Xander. Let me ask it this way: would Xander be in your player pool, Spencer?
So when I gave the answer about Victor Hovland and saying that there's just like places I would rather go, I obviously talked about moving up as one of the choices. I would rather play Xander. I think Xander's very intriguing for this tournament. Maybe that's the way to play Xander in one of those like exacta sort of markets to where Xander can't win and he comes in second place there. And maybe that's the natural way that this finishes. But I think Xander's very intriguing. And here's the interesting thing, because there was the longest time, and I'm sure as you guys all remember, JT Xander, no cut tournament, they would be like 40% owned every single week. And now all of a sudden we've lost that narrative at some point, and people forget how good Xander actually is during these no cut events. So I think Xander's a very savvy pick this week.
Joel, any thoughts on Andrew Putnam, in or out?
You know, I think I don't love dipping that low into the 6K range. If I were going to, I like Putnam. He's one of the guys I go in that range. But if I don't have to, I probably won't go there.
All right. Does that mean your builds are going to be largely like balanced? You're not going to go like stars and scrubs?
Yes, I think this week for me, I want to be more balanced than stars and scrubs as much as I can. And that includes like doing Hovland in like the low 8K range as opposed to doing Rory and Scheffler.
All right. Well, I mentioned the Michael Jordan fist pump earlier from David when he stole one of Spencer's guys. Well, we got our own Jordan with the audience, and it's Jordan Spieth. So that's our pick. Not a very controversial pick. I totally get this pick. It makes sense. Love the history here in particular. Let me go around the horn here. Spencer, in or out on Jordan Spieth?
Controversial. I'm going to say out.
All right. David, in or out on Jordan Spieth?
That is controversial because I mean, look, objectively the course history here is ridiculous, and it looks like he's back to his best. I was between Homer and Spieth for a little bit in terms of where my money was going on the betting card this week. The only reason it went to Homer was the weather, and just the price was a bit sharper around Homer because Spieth just opened so short. But I think objectively he's a solid play this week for me.
Interesting. Let me ask you this, David, before I get Joel's opinion on this. If it's rank the following 4 players in terms of win equity, let's say in terms of let's talk win equity. Max Homa, Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, Victor Hovland.
Homer, Spieth, Thomas, Hovland.
Very interesting. All right, I'm glad I asked the question. Joel, in or out on Jordan Spieth?
I like Spieth. If I was ranking the 4, he would probably be 3rd on that list, but I still like him.
All right, fair enough. All right, Spencer, it's your turn. You've got Eric Cole, Colin Morikawa, Wyndham Clark, Denny McCarthy, and
I'm going to drop down in salary here and take a golfer that we've talked about so many times on this show, how they are better on a club down course. And I think we've even seen that a little bit here with some of the results that he's put together. 14th place finish in 2021. I think he's a much better golfer at this stage of his career. I'm going to take Cameron Davis at 6,700.
Very interesting. Joel, thoughts on Cameron Davis?
That would be my preferred play if I'm going down the 6,700 range. I like Davis there as a value.
David, in or out on Cameron Davis?
What I'd say with Davis, I mean, he gained so many strokes at the American Express. Granted, that's only on 2 rounds at the Pete Dye course, but it's somewhat correlated in terms of the different courses that Pete Dye puts together and what we can expect from Pebble. Did finish 14th here in 2021, which is last time around the track. Probably the most intriguing is that Ben Coley put him up this week. He's obviously a friend of the show and personally as well on the Twitter sphere, and he's someone I have a huge amount of respect for in terms of his selections. He's put him forward this week as well. So there could well be something there.
All right. That's very interesting. Shout out Ben Coley, friend of the show. Joel, you got back-to-back picks coming up to close out your team. Who's it going to be?
All right, I'm going to start with Sam Burns here with my first pick. Sam Burns tends to do well with the proximity of 100 to 150. He's good with kind of avoiding disaster. He's on a really good form. He's under 9K. He has plenty of upside. And the ownership looks more than reasonable. So there's plenty of reasons, plenty of upside you can get with the Sam Burns pick. And I'm going to round out this roster with Brendan Todd. I think people are overlooking Brendan Todd. He's playing great golf. I mean, to many reasons we mentioned for other guys. You know, a guy who's not that long, one of his biggest weaknesses should be neutralized here on this course. But the biggest thing with Todd is, you know, we've been talking about Todd for years. He's always been around, but he's just playing better right now than typically is. And I think people, because Todd's been around for so long, kind of just overlook him a little bit because, you know, he's just kind of a middling guy. But Todd's playing well. This is a good course fit. I like Todd a lot this week. I think he's a safe option for cash. He's cheap enough. I also think he has enough upside to make your tournament lineups as well.
Inside the top 33 over his last 4 tournaments, and his last 2 here, 2nd and 16th. I think he sizes up real well. He's one of my favorite guys, honestly, this week. David, your opinion on Brendan Todd? Did I overstate it? Did I oversell it? Did Joel oversell it? Or do you like Brendan Todd as well?
I did really like Brendan Todd. I'm surprised that the ownership for Todd has got to where it's got. I'm getting 9%. And so that surprised me because I was kind of hoping he would be like a sneaky chuck him into a few GPP lineups and get different kind of play because I really like his wedge game, particularly, well, basically anything under 150 yards. He's one of the best on tour. I like that his putting and short game aspects are really going to be important on these, the smaller screens on the PGA Tour, averaging just 3,500 square feet. So I think I agree with Joel. I think he's an excellent pick. I was just so surprised that his ownership had gotten up to what I'm seeing at the moment. Obviously, check into the Win Daily Discord, use that promo before it expires tomorrow in the description because Stephen, our ownership guy, just has some of the sharpest ownership numbers that I've ever seen for sure. So he'll have an update of where Brendan Todd's ownership ends up at.
Yeah, and this is quite the cliffhanger because I'm seeing ownership that is half of the ownership you're seeing. I'm seeing closer to 4.5%, 5%. So Stephen will clarify that in Win Daily Sports or at Win Daily Sports. He puts it in the Discord. He puts it on windailysports.com. So we'll get the answers to that tomorrow. But hopefully, I don't think Brendan Todd's going to end up that high. I think we're going to probably see 5-6% tops personally. Spencer, you got one more pick to round out your team. Who's it going to be?
First off, I will convolute this discussion. I have Brendan Todd at 10%, whatever that is worth. I don't know where that's going to head, but worth noting. Second, I do want to rank the 4 players that you asked about, Sia. I would say Homa, Thomas, Hovland, Spieth. I like Spieth. I don't want to make it sound like this is something that I hate him. I just think he has the worst win equity when you're paying 22% ownership at a price tag that is very similar to everybody else. There's just places I would rather go there. So that answers that second one. As far as my pick goes, I don't know if in show history we've ever gotten to the final pick and somebody's sitting here with $12,000. So it would be something if I decided to take Jason Day and just leave thousands of dollars, like just leave 3,600 on the board, go that route. Not going to do that though. I am going to take Rory McIlroy. I know that there are a lot of people that are completely out on Rory this week. When I wrote my article over at Rotoballer, I think I had 10 people write me saying that that's the worst pick on the board. And I know he missed the cut here in 2018. I know that ownership's starting to trend in that direction. I think this 2024 is going to be the year of Rory. I don't know exactly what that ends up meaning. Does he win a major? I don't know. I always fall for this trap at Augusta where every single year I think he's going to win the Masters and he always breaks my heart when I end up on him. But I really, really like Rory this week. I think this is a nice spot where he is the deserving favorite on the board for a reason.
Another celebrity sighting in the chat. First of all, you're all celebrities. Thanks for being in here. But of course, it's Back Nine Bets, otherwise known as Model Maniac, otherwise known as Byron. He's got so many names. He's in the chat. He's actually nominated a guy. Who do we have in here? Is it Scott before Harmon? Did you all break my heart? I can't tell who got locked here. So we got Harmon from Silent Assassin. Oh, okay. So it's Harmon, right? Did I get that right? I think it's Harmon from Silent Assassin and from Zach Jeffers. And then Byron came in with Adam Scott. All right. I like Brian Harmon, y'all. I like, nobody's talking about him, but I don't really understand. David, I'm going to kick this to you first. I don't understand the argument against Brian Harmon, especially when you're talking about this price. I'm taking a look at his ownership. It's getting up there to that 10% range as far as what I'm seeing. And it might, be in somewhere between 8 and 12%. That's in an 80-man field. That's nothing crazy. I just think he can get hot on approach. We know that. I mean, granted, his approach lately hasn't been great. The short game is great. We know in the elements he's great. Oh, by the way, can he win in a field like this? I mean, what was it, 7 months ago, the Open Championship where he actually won? What's the argument against him, David?
Yeah, I mean, and going to that Open Championship victory, what was the weather like that week? It was pouring with rain. It was incredibly windy, and he trounced the field. So I think he's a really savvy play. I'd say he's a different golfer to, I think a lot of people just looking at his course history here, which isn't fabulous, right? Like, and he's played here 5 times, but he was a completely different golfer back then to what he is now. And all of those did come quite some time ago. So look, I do think that he's a pretty savvy play, and I'll just go straight into my pick if you're ready.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So I'll go Patrick Cantlay. I think that's pretty obvious with the salary that I've got there. I had a nervous moment when Jordan Spieth got taken, because if someone else had taken Patrick Cantlay at that point, I would have actually ended up in the situation like Spence and having to leave about $2,000 on the table because everyone else in that kind of range has been taken. This really is just not from any great love from Patrick Cantlay. It's more from a fact of, I need to get a little bit different here. I've got the salary, and he is the lowest owned of anyone over 9,100. So getting a good discount in ownership there. I don't think he's looked the best that he ever has at the moment. But look, he's played here a lot, and he has never missed a cut. He's had 3 top 10s and an 11th and a 21st as well. So 3rd, 4th the last 2 years on this course. So if there's ever a bounce back spot, it could well be Pebble Beach. And if I'm getting a massive ownership discount off the back of that, I'm quite happy to actually take him there.
I just want to say one thing very quickly to this. So I obviously knew David was going to take Cantlay. just with the amount of salary he had left and who was on the board. I highly considered, like, the problem is I'm too competitive at my core that I couldn't get myself to do it, and I decided to go Rory. But I very much so considered taking Cantlay just to throw off the entire draft for David there.
And
I'm glad you didn't. I mean, it would have been a good opportunity, seeing as I did take. You said I stole your first 3 picks with my first 3 picks. So if there was ever a time for revenge, it was that, and then watch me take like SH Kim or something and leave $4,000 on the table.
I very much was considering taking Xander also. Like I was going to round it out. I don't remember exactly where I was at. It was Xander and I guess Fleetwood maybe was the route I was going to go to finish it. And so like that was very much in play until you decided to take Xander. So I don't know. I didn't go that route. Didn't want to do it. I can't have you hitting Pavon on the show and then just like blatantly stealing the obvious pick that you're going to make. But I did consider it, David. I just want you to know that.
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting is if you had taken Cantlay, you would have left a few thousand on the table, which is normally like that's probably not something you should do. And I'm not recommending it, but if there was ever a tournament where you want to leave more on the table, make your lineup different, make your lineup construction different by leaving, I don't know, 800, 1200, even honestly, like I think in this, like the lineups I've built, there have been times where I've like, and I haven't finalized any lineups, but there have been times where I've had 1,800, 2,000 left on the table. And again, if you took Spencer's lineup, you take out Rory, you put in Patrick Cantlay, how much does he leave on the table? A ton. So just something to consider. That's one way to get different. Just go with your conviction and just don't be beholden to the pricing so much so that your construction of your lineup is not what you want it to be because you feel beholden to getting close to that 50,000 mark. By the way, it's crazy, like soft pricing indeed. Max Homa, Xander Schauffele, Patrick Cantlay, all in the same lineup. And none of the other 3 guys for David like feel super puntish to me. So, I mean, again, soft pricing, you can kind of do what you want. So keep that in mind. Joel, we don't have any first round leaders out yet. I'm so unimpressed with just the fact that, listen, it's Tuesday night. Like, what are we doing? Get it together. Should we just give out some matchups we like or like a finishing position we like before we wrap this show?
Well, it's something. I guess there's something weird going on with the 2 courses. I mean, they're probably going to break it up, the 2 first round leaders. So if they release some odds, obviously get in Discord. We'll play some plays in there. While you're at it, hit the like button. Give us a follow. It goes a long way. Am I frozen? Everyone was great.
You're frozen, but we can hear you. I'll take over for now while you unfreeze yourself. But so we don't have first round leaders. So Spencer, I don't know if you have a matchup or like a long shot or whatever. You probably have a matchup actually. You've already done Better Golf Pod with Nick, right?
We haven't recorded. I have done my Action Network show with Roberto. We went through on Links and Locks and we talked about a lot of this. My favorite play of the week is Sungjae Im -120 over Cameron Young. A lot of volatility to that play, but I'm just looking to take on Cameron Young in that spot. And I will throw out another bet here for anybody to consider. Another volatile wager. Wyndham Clark -114 over Corey Connors. There's just not a player in my model that has a lower floor on these POA greens than Connors does. I'm fine making him beat me. And it's kind of the same sentiment that I keep going back to every single time that I talk about this board from a betting perspective, like specifically from head-to-head wagers. I'm shooting for a little bit more upside just because we don't have that missed cut equity. And it naturally helps when Connors and Young and these players are fade candidates for me to begin with. So those would be the 2 plays I'll give out on here.
By the way, good question from Mosh. Do you know where those matchups are off the top of your head?
Yeah, the Sungjae one was at Bet365, and then the Clark one was over at Bet Rivers.
By the way, tee times have dropped. This must have been just in the last hour while we were on. Now, first round leaders still aren't out. At least they're not out on the books that I'm looking at right now, but they should. I would think now that tee times are out, maybe they'll have, maybe it'll be tomorrow morning, but that's good to know this just so everybody knows. This tournament starts at 11:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. First one's out, Christian Bezadenhout, Hayden Buckley, and Ben Griffin, and Taylor Montgomery. Actually, there's a handful that are going out at 11:45, not just them. Ludwig and Rory go out first as well. So keep that in mind. But the matchup I'm going to give out, it's funny. Like we're all targeting Cam Young, I guess, because on DraftKings, I like Sam Burns. This is one of my matchups. I'm going to bet Sam Burns -120. That's your boy, Joel. You picked Sam Burns on your Draftcast, I believe, over Cameron Young. Listen, Sam Burns is playing pretty well. I mean, if you look at the metrics, I mean, he kind of melted down recently on a Sunday, but he's playing really well. I think he's a fine course fit. Cameron Young, you look at the metrics, like he just hasn't had his stuff together. I mean, you look at literally every, any of the basic metrics, whether it's off the tee or approach, around the green, putting, like I don't know what's going on with him, but he's not there yet. And I'll go ahead and take the -120 over Cam Young with Sam Burns. David, anything to offer in this market?
Yeah, so I've just got the one play. I'm in on fading Cam Young this week on both of those plays, whether it's Sam Burns or nice bounce back spot for Sungjae. I think that's pretty savvy. Sungjae broke my heart last week, missing the cut on the number, because I would have been 6-6 if it was not for that, including having Pavon as the winner. So it literally cost me thousands of dollars Sungjae last week.
Brutal.
So I would have to just put that aside and forgive him, especially in that matchup against Young. But for me, I've got Xander Schauffele over Victor Hovland for the tournament. So you can get that if you have Bet365 at +100. So he's the underdog in that market. And if you were over on MGM, you can get it at -111. But MGM doesn't pay out tie. So if it's a tie, it's void. Basically, it counts as a push. So whereas Bet365, a tie is a loss. So that's part of the reason for the difference in those numbers. I just like the all-round game for Schauffele. I like him in this kind of weather. I still have some concern about the chipping from Hovland, especially because he's fired his chipping coach despite getting massive improvements in chipping, which still makes no sense to me. I have no idea why he's made that move, separating from Joe Mayo, but quite happy to take Xander in that spot. And the other one, off the back of the show, I do really like Benny Arnon. You can get him over Jason Day, Spencer, shut your ears. Over at DraftKings at -130, you can take Benny Arnon to beat Jason Day over the course of the tournament.
By the way, I know your Xander play was at Bet365. I believe at +100. Was that what it was at?
+100 at Bet365, and then at MGM it's -111.
I was going to say, if you don't have any of those two, it's at a worse number at DraftKings. It's -120, but that's not a crazy bad number, not a crazy bad difference. But obviously, if you can shop your lines and you're on Bet365, you're on BetMGM and DraftKings, the best number you're going to get is Bet365. But just so you know, that matchup is on DraftKings. All right, Joel, you got to close the show for us, but I don't know if you have a matchup or a finishing position to give out as well.
Well, I'm going to take Cam Young to win the tournament. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I got two plays I'm gonna give out for everyone. I'm not going matchups. I'm going to go top 30. I just want to bet on these guys. I think they're going to give you a good result. Both guys I drafted. I like Brandon Todd, top 30. You get him at +125 on DraftKings. I also like Sahith Theegala at +115. That's a wrap for tonight. Like I was saying before when I froze, give us a follow, hit the like button. We'll post these lineups. Let us know who you think is going to win. We are going to crown a winner next week. Good luck this week. See it. Am I forgetting anything?
Well, we forgot first round leaders only because there aren't any present. We'll put those in Discord. But there was one other thing. Oh my gosh, how could we forget? Sports.